you ready for the incredible sound of classic rock? No? Good, because now it's time for Visiting the Village.
Hello and welcome to Visiting the Village. I'm Paul Kilduff-Taylor, and joining me as ever is the impressionable Ian Hardingham.
Hello Mr. Paul Kilduff-Taylor. I am a new Ian Hardingham for a new year. 2016 edition. Improved graphics. Ready to go.
Let's get out of this dungeon.
It's the top story.
PC Gamer report that a Russian man is filing a lawsuit against Bethesda and its localization firm SoftClab for failing to adequately warn him that playing Fallout 4 could be detrimental to his health and well-being. He apparently lost his job, split up with his wife, and stopped eating or sleeping because he was so addicted to Fallout 4. Ian Hardingham, are developers responsible for addiction?
No, not developers, but localization firms are definitely responsible for addiction. This actually touched on a topic that I have been talking with Visiting the Village medical consultant Joe Clacy about. Generally, I don't think we need to go into this too much, but there are lots of fun things in life that can go wrong for a small minority of people who basically get addicted to them or whatever, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't be able to do them. So I don't think in this particular case there's anything particularly egregious about Fallout 4 that would make me think it was any different to any other game.
Yeah.
Fallout 4 is quite addictive. I'm actually kind of not that much of a fan of it anymore, but it is quite addictive. But no, I'm not going to blame Bethesda for this one.
I think the most interesting thing to do with this topic is take the kind of meta perspective. So, for so many years you have people laughing at the ridiculous warnings that come with products. Things like, hot coffee may burn your hand, beware. The epilepsy warnings and stuff that you have to have on games. The really long preamble. And the reason that you need that is because of lawsuits like this. Because someone has got this huge problem, as you say. Some people have problems, and those problems lead them to pathological behaviour, bad behaviour with pleasurable addictive things. That's a known thing. But it means that if you have a situation where it's possible to sue a company over one of those things, someone will do it. So you end up in this kind of weird legislative warfare. And I wonder if there's a way of stopping that, because it doesn't really benefit anyone.
Yeah, I guess there'll always be lawsuits, though, as long as there's the system in place to allow people to sue when there's a perceived problem. You're going to have kind of non-nuisance lawsuits, which this kind of does feel like. So I don't know if there's much to be done there. I kind of just sort of wring my hands of this. I'm sorry this guy got so addicted to a game. He could have got addicted to something good. This is just like even worse than it's Fallout 4. Sorry, I do quite like Fallout 4. He split up with his wife. That probably is bad. It's, and if he was 13 again, I'd have more time for this. But you have to learn that you can't just play Fallout 4 for 30 hours in a row, even more. It's sort of a lesson that you should have learned by now.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to be really lacking in sympathy. I'm not. There's not much holiday spirit in me for this man. I think if it's this bad on Fallout 4, he better not play Far Cry 1 or something.
Yeah.
That'd be really terrible. So
I know. I mean, I lose the sympathy for him at the point where he takes it, to a legal situation. It does sound like a really disastrous thing to have happened to him. And I think, it's quite easy to just say, oh, what an idiot. And this was on PC Gamer and they kind of made light of it. And obviously, it's a bad thing to happen. This stuff does happen to people. But again, I don't think it's anything either particularly to do with games or particularly that the legal system should be solving, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Gaia Legends, which is a combined digital and miniatures game based on the epic Sanskrit poem the Ramayana, has launched, with Disney Infinity Skylanders and Amiibo all still placing prominently on Santa's list. You can tell I wrote this topic before Christmas, can't you? What do you think of the state of digital miniatures games?
Well, yeah, I'm just trying to work out whether these are a weird transitory thing, where we're still in a place where we care about physical things,
Yeah.
and obviously we also care about computer games. So this collision of the two, I'm wondering whether it's just transitional, and sooner or later we'll forget about the physical, and this will have just been an artifact of the time, or if there's something more fundamental here. Obviously, physical toys are, I think, pretty much always going to be a bigger deal for very young people.
Yes.
Having physical toys is awesome. I think even adults are going to continue to enjoy having physical things.
Yeah.
Obviously, the idea of taking... You know, a lot of people like collecting miniatures, and in some ways it's a bit disappointing because they are just miniatures. They're just sort of things you put on your desk or whatever, and they look nice. And the great thing about these games is that they make them more than that.
Yeah.
And again, they're a bit like Magic the Gathering cards to a certain extent in this kind of thing. I think that the problem that I have with these games right now is that there aren't enough miniatures. I'd want it to be more like Magic the Gathering cards, where there are hundreds and hundreds of them. I'd like them to be sort of weird differences, like weapons in Diablo, weird differences that you can actually see on them. I don't know if there could be a procedural painting thing or something, so you could get like a truly rare one, not just like a one that isn't made very often, but like a really rare version of one. That would be really exciting to me. But I'm quite in favour of these things. I mean, I think all of the games so far have been pretty substandard, which isn't surprising at all. I think they do their jobs properly. But maybe this will, maybe there'll be one of these that evolves into something great.
I'm kind of with you on this. Like, I think this is an interesting area, and I think the ones we've seen, obviously very commercially successful products, I think that they don't really display the sort of exciting nature of this from a gameplay point of view. I mean, you could imagine something like a big Games Workshop game where you have all your armies, and then maybe there's some augmented reality component to that as well, so you can view like what the miniatures are doing in the battles or something like that. That might be quite cool. Or a different kind of thing that you can collect that has a digital component as well. I don't really think this is a dead end. I mean, we're still yet to see how it's going to combine with other technologies and with different types of game design. So I suspect there is a lot more to it. Having said that, I haven't really played any of these games. I suspect they're quite limited. I know the amiibo thing where you could use them in different games just felt very gimmicky to me, but then that's just an added incentive for people to collect like fun figures of Nintendo characters, really. So that's kind of different.
Yeah, these things are kind of gimmick land right now. I mean, kids game and gimmick land. I'd really like to see the next version be something like Lego, where you can build your own miniature and it properly imports that. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
That's kind of something I thought of while you were talking about the Games Workshop thing. It's still... I'm not very sentimental when it comes to this stuff. So a lot of the time when I see things like this, I kind of just think, well, it's better when it's just a game. You know, there's more freedom, there's less nonsense, and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if there's a property that I'm excited enough about that if they made a miniatures digital game, I would be really sort of buying into. I'm sort of racking my brain right now. I don't really know exactly, like something that I'm really massively into. You know, and I think there's a football players one, I think, that's been muted or something like that. Like sort of football stickers, but with little models that you can play FIFA. The problem is that just the vast majority of the time, the games are complete nonsense. So for me, it's almost like I want this sort of cool future where the game randomly creates a sort of a something, and a 3D printer prints it, and then you put it back on the thing, which all sounds completely ridiculous. But that's sort of where I want this to go.
I just think you're right. Like, I think there's scope for good old business term disruption here, like something that could be really unusual. Maybe it is Lego, like something modular where you can build things that have a sort of digital consequence when you build them. I can really imagine kids, especially sort of mid-aged kids, getting into that kind of thing, the kind of ages that are still playing Minecraft. So that's interesting. There's another aspect of this for me which is slightly odd, which is I think miniatures slightly cross it over my nerd threshold. You know, there's certain things I want in my house. I have some pretty nerdy things in my house. I have lots of games consoles. I have, you know, old PC game boxes and things, but I don't really want figures of characters. That sort of irks me slightly.
I'm almost with you there. I think it would really have to be an IP that I felt a lot of ownership over, that I also felt was pretty a pretty unusual thing to be into. So, in some ways, like, even though I'm kind of a bit sort of bemused by a lot of the things Nintendo have done recently, a lot of the amiibo stuff is sort of reasonably exciting. There's something that it tickles about sort of a much younger part of me and my real fandom back then. There's something there. But again, not quite enough. I'm with you. Miniatures are a bit strange.
Yeah, there's something about that. It's everyone has different levels of this. Don't get me wrong. Like, some people would not have 4 games consoles in their living room. Some people's wives would not let them have 4 games consoles in their living room. It's different. So it just is a personal thing for me. Also, I think the kind of figures that these are. When I was young, I really liked action figures that you could sort of make up worlds with, make up games with. And a lot of these figurines are very static. They're like statues, and that was never something that I liked as a kid, so it seems unlikely I'm going to like it as an adult.
Yeah, and that just for me circles back around. Like, there's so much more stuff you can do in digital stuff, but I mean, it really is, I guess, still about young people, about kids who have this awesome extra dimension to the plastic tat that they want. And that's good. I
mean, finally, I guess, for kids, Infinity and Skylanders are great games for kids. They really work. Kids really love collecting them. They're fun. They're intergenerational as well. I know a lot of parents, like playing Skylanders games with their kids and like getting involved with that too. So that's all very cool. From a product perspective, you cannot really fault these things, especially as you can kind of keep coming out with new additions and so on. They're sort of a marketing dream. So that part of my brain obviously likes them a lot.
Yeah, totally.
Rockstar have introduced an update which allows players to hire other players as bodyguards in GTA Online. Can player employment in games ever be a serious mechanic?
I don't know. I feel like that maybe that would be the case. I mean, I don't know if this involves a future full of microtransactions where poor people that can't afford to buy GTA dollars actually have to work in-game for them. I kind of think probably not, because that sounds like that'll lead to less money for the developers. I'm kind of there's a larger issue that I want to talk about in relation to this, which is that it feels like there are a lot of sort of small to medium size innovations going on in multiplayer that are being paid a lot less attention to now, because they're sort of rolled into these big persistent games like GTA Online and like Metal Gear Solid. I think there are a lot of stuff going on that actually sort of is interestingly disruptive. Some of these things will stick, and they're not massive news items. They're not an entire game is based around these ideas. They're just being introduced into these big existing things with lots of players that's already making a lot of money, and that's kind of interesting. I think sometimes it makes it harder for interesting indie games to come up with some really interesting multiplayer ideas. But I think it's kind of like the Facebook issue. It's like these mechanics might not be enough to support a whole game, but within the sandbox or the playground of Minecraft or of GTA or of Metal Gear Solid, they make sense and they can get enough traction there. It makes me kind of a bit sad that you have to. A lot of these things can only survive within these kind of sort of massive game things, and that's kind of a bit annoying to me, because I don't really want like a load of interesting innovation to only be happening within GTA or even really within Minecraft.
This felt very neutered to me, the way that this was implemented. It's this thing that you can turn on and you get this monthly salary for it, and players who have above a certain level of money can do it. That feels really like the AAA-ification of this idea, which has existed in sort of virtual worlds and EVE Online and so on. You'd get this happening in MMOs a lot. I've talked about it with Second Life a lot before. And I this kind of made me feel, I think the way you sometimes feel when you see a mechanic kind of brought into a more mainstream context, it's just boring. Like, this doesn't excite me in and of itself. I think it's only exciting if you're a GTA Online player and you want to do something weird.
It's a version of an idea certainly I've had in the past, a lot of people have had in the past. It's something that they'd really like to see properly fleshed out, and I agree, it's just disappointing because it's just kind of the most boring thing for someone who doesn't actually play GTA Online. I always wanted a version of EVE where there was lots of people who worked for corporations, but that kind of happened anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure whether you actually needed to have any kind of employment. That just appeared to coalesce out of the way people relate to each other online. I guess, to go back to my earlier point, though, I still wonder... people talk about Facebook being the internet for a lot of people, which is a terrifying thought. But, in some ways that's right. So, some people, I don't think this is just a complete fiction.
No, it's not.
Created by Facebook. But, they basically view the entire web through the lens of Facebook. And I wonder if there's, maybe the next thing after Unity maybe would be a really open platform, a bit like the 3D web browsing, which never ever took off. Maybe there's some set of meta enough mechanics and engine stuff that would allow like a truly free-form exploration. Because when I go and explore Minecraft stuff, it's great, but it doesn't feel quite Wild West enough. Doesn't feel like anything could happen next. If I go to a website, certainly in 1996, if I randomly went around the internet, come across TimeCube, anything could happen.
Yeah.
And that's a feeling I want, but within a kind of framework which allows people to just put random stuff on there. I'm kind of talking in a pretty weird meandering way.
I know what you mean. There's this virtual worlds never really ever happened. There was Second Life, which got traction for a bit, and there's no 3D world experience where everything is interconnected, where people are wandering around. And that was something people predicted for such a long time. And I think that's probably just because it's so inefficient versus just browsing web pages. There's no need for it. You're either playing a game in a 3D world, which is fine, or you're getting information from the internet in the 2D world, which is better. So
I think what's become reasonably clear is that for this stuff to work, for you basically need to have a surrounding game that provides a progression mechanic,
context. Yeah.
The reason the MMOs have been the most successful is because they've got that kind of overarching reason to keep on going.
Yes.
They've got the kind of base sort of, addiction loop or whatever. Not even addiction loop, but just like the thing that compels you to keep collecting, etc. And I'm still, for me, just find that even something like Asheron's Call, which is sort of one of the versions of this which has the least sort of overbearing aesthetic for me. And now obviously Second Life doesn't have a particular overbearing aesthetic, although it has its own issues in that direction. I don't particularly want to go and explore a lot of these MMOs because I don't feel like that aesthetic is sort of open enough for me.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel like something could work. I always, when I was trying to design games like this in my head 5-10 years ago, I was always sort of thinking that maybe you just had to have money in the game to make it compelling enough. Like the game was kind of about storing money online, but that's probably way too specific. And actually, again, you were talking about gambling and stuff last week. Money is not generally equatable to the kind of progression that you have in a different game. Like if I get really excited about being completionist of Metal Gear Solid, I don't think that's anything like money.
No.
I think money brings a whole different set of mechanics into play.
Right. Money makes you think about your real life. It makes you think about, well, what can I do with this money? It attaches all the emotions that you have about money to it. It's very powerful. Whereas I think a lot of games are about creating a new kind of value for you that's independent from money, that makes you forget about money. Even things where, even free-to-play games, the money that's happening there, that's why they obfuscate the currency so much. It's because you're not thinking about spending money, you're thinking about buying energy, and it's all about the context of that within the game. So I agree with you. I don't think brute forcing that with money is necessarily the right thing to do. Having said that, there are games that have been doing interesting things with money, like that, the Jason Rora gambling game, and that's still an underexplored area. But I think you're right. It's not a solution to that problem directly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. And another big problem is that with money, it has to be at best zero sum.
Yeah.
You can decide to give everyone playing Candy Crush some advancement if you decide that's the right thing to do. You can't do that if money's the base thing. So I think it's something that I used to think is a thing that could be used much more interestingly in games than I now think it can be.
I mean, it does play into EVE quite a lot. The value of ships and so on is a really big thing for people. because they do have genuine real world value.
Yeah, although I do wonder, there's like an extent to stuff like, and again, I'll go back to Magic cards. There are times where you play games with things that have big monetary value, like the ships that you're talking about. And I think that you just, as a player, decide if you want to think, like really think about them as money, or just as like a bit of a side aspect. Like, some people would never consider selling a Magic card or selling a ship thing, or ever cashing out, having cash out CSK. So I'm just kind of trying to work out like what place in the psyche that the actual value of these things takes. I wonder what it's like playing CS:GO nowadays. If I unlocked if I opened a particularly weird gun, would I sell it? I don't know. I mean, if it's 15 quid, it's like, okay, maybe. I don't know.
I guess one of my final questions on this is, could you have a game which has the player interaction of EVE without the mechanical complexity of EVE? Are those two things completely proportional and related?
Yeah, it seems to me that the longer I've looked at games like this, yes, you have to have a kind of a complicated game. Like, that's what draws people in. That's kind of the basic thing. It's like you can spend as much time as you want designing an insane restaurant, but you kind of have to have the food. I apologize for that metaphor, but that's kind of, I do think it's like a basic, without it, it's like no one just starts playing it to start with.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. You need that sort of, maybe it's the ability to do things on your own, or to the ability to learn. Like, there's so much information there that you can and have to learn both on your own and through other people, that it probably necessitates, if not collaboration, then at least involvement with the knowledge base of that game on some level. So through that you get the investment. I think even before
that, you have to create the value of playing, as we were talking about, and I feel like the complex systems are really important when you're initially making someone feel that there's value in starting playing this game.
Absolutely. Right, now a big topic. It's the Beginner's Guide controversy. So you've just played the Beginner's Guide, so we'll talk about the Beginner's Guide in general at some point, but I'll just introduce this topic. So in Destructoid's Best New IPs of 2015 list, written by Laura Kate Dale, there was the following comment about Davey Redden's meta opus, the Beginner's Guide. Quote, "Just make sure to complete it within your Steam refund window, as there are legitimate reasons to want to return this game after purchase," close quote. Many thought she was referring to the game's length. She was in fact referring to the fact that some players believe the game, which is ostensibly a collection of levels taken without the original creator's permission, to be a work of non-fiction, and thus would feel uncomfortable paying money for it. Dale received a large number of complaints to this effect when Destructoid first covered the game. So, Ian Hardingham, you've just played the Beginner's Guide. What did you think?
So I got, I think, probably 3/4 of the way through before it crashed.
Oh, okay.
So I haven't actually finished it, which I'm sure is a problem.
Yes, that's going to be interesting.
I have to say, so I apologise to everyone for that. I have to say that I liked some parts of it. None of it offended me. I did find it quite boring.
Yeah.
And I didn't, I found some of the interaction, I really didn't like the conversations that you have in the game. They felt like worse than pointless to me. Like, because I knew they weren't going to have any impact on anything, because it's not an interactive game.
Sure.
Basically. So I didn't want to have this really silly interaction. I don't know why that really bothered me. The biggest feeling I had from it, the first biggest feeling, was how amazingly evocative Source engine levels can still be. And how badly explored the idea of using first-person shooter-esque levels to create feelings in players. It's how unexplored it still is. Like, this is starting to try and explore that in kind of a basic referential way. I guess the Beginner's Guide, it seemed to me to be a bit about someone who was very insecure and some of the issues that a lot of people have. And I thought that it was sort of mildly effective at making me think a bit about what it's like to be someone who has massive anxiety associated with human interactions. I thought on that level it was kind of like very mildly effective. I didn't massively like the narration, but I don't want to like pass massive judgment on that until I've actually finished it.
Right, okay, so this is going to be interesting because we can attempt a relatively spoiler-free conversation about it. Now, I don't know exactly where you are, but I certainly didn't feel like anything particularly changed. I don't think talking about the game is going to affect your interest in the ending.
Okay.
So I think we can probably go ahead with that. I think I'm surprised that you engaged with it that much. I thought you were going to really dislike it because it's clearly about somebody who works in a field which is the same field as you, but works in almost a totally opposite way in that field. And I didn't think that would resonate with you very well. So I'm interested that you felt like you got some insight into someone else's sort of relationship with games through it.
Well, no, I mean, I was talking just about the relationship with human beings.
Humans, yeah.
In terms of game design, I didn't think... Yeah, that didn't resonate with me at all. Like, yeah. That felt... I kind of, to me, it felt while I was playing it, because the narration is basically... The idea of the game is that the narrator is talking you through the creative decisions and thought processes behind the person who's created a bunch of different games that are somehow connected.
Yeah.
Just for any of you listeners who haven't played it.
Yeah.
I didn't like... I kind of found it sort of Hollywood-esque to be talking about this guy's decision to put random flying blocks and the narrator's absolutely disgusting evaluations of what that meant. Like I kind of felt that it was about just how pretentious and stupid those kind of observations often are. And possibly it ends up being about the narrator's relationship with the creator, I guess.
Right.
Which is cool. But I didn't really take it as it didn't make me think about game design in terms of what he was saying. It made me think about game design in terms of how I was feeling.
Yeah.
I guess.
That's interesting. So you kind of see it as a sort of rejection of interpretation, really. It makes you sort of feel like all interpretation is bad.
Well, that's a bit too far, and I
Right.
don't think it's all about that. But I did kind of think, if it turns out that there's no sort of irony or criticism inherent in the script, then I'll be a little bit surprised because it just felt like a kind of not massively over pretentious, but a somewhat pretentious reading of a guy's oeuvre. And I was thinking much more about it in those terms than the actual content of the criticism of the guy's oeuvre.
Sure, I think that's fair. I mean, there's definitely an element to the narration which you're supposed to question. Certainly, you're kind of going through and you're thinking, well, maybe, especially with the early levels, what you said, it's sort of being necessarily over the top. You're thinking, well, that just is just a block there because he put a block there, probably, isn't it? And that's and that really plays through everything else as they get sort of increasingly complex. You really start to think, well, again, does this person talking have any right to be telling me this stuff? Is their perspective on this interesting? And what are they doing to it? And so as a game sort of about the process of interpreting games, I think it's really effective and really interesting because it throws up all of those questions. The main problems that I had with it, and this is going to kind of bring us back to the topic, is that it seemed very much to me about almost baiting that conversation. So the entire focus of the game really is about trying to make people feel uncomfortable with that. And as such, it felt quite didactic to me. It felt like it was sort of telling you that you should be uncomfortable about that. And that's the most interesting thing that we can possibly be talking about. So that was sort of my main problem with the game was the focus on that. Don't know what you think of that.
Yeah, I think I need to finish it
Sure.
to say much else on those lines. I don't have a problem with what you've just said. It sounds very reasonable.
Yeah.
I don't know yet. I suspect I'm going to end up not thinking it's all that effective.
Yeah.
In terms of what it's trying to do. Although I do think what it's trying to do is an interesting idea. I guess this is one of the most meta games ever made because it's about... Not only is it like using games to talk about a lot of stuff around games and a lot of things that you see in games to be used in a different way, and it's about talking about the process of creating games and what that says about the creators. It really must be one of, if not the most meta game, and I kind of ended up feeling like, yes, this is a good start. I would like to see something much more than this, and I'm always going to compare it to Dear Esther.
Yeah.
You know, even though they're the same genre, but they're not in any way the same tone or topic. And I don't think it's anywhere near as good as Dear Esther.
Yeah.
From what I've seen so far. But it was definitely worth playing. I didn't hate it or anything like that.
That's good. I suspected there was a non-zero chance you would completely hate it. So that's interesting. I also think it's inferior to Dear Esther. I think Dear Esther is excellent, and I rate it a lot higher than a lot of other people. The Beginner's Guide is, again, I agree with you a lot. I think it's one of those things where I'm so glad that it exists. Like, I'm so glad that someone has done it, because it really opens up the potential for a lot more stuff, and it's an incredibly, I think, brave and insightful and difficult thing to make and make well, but it does have a lot of problems. It's not something that I unreservedly love either. Now, this stuff about people's responses to it as a sort of slightly new thing for games have been really interesting. So there's this huge anger around the idea that what the narrator is saying is true, that he's taken all these levels from someone else and put them in a game. And I don't think Resin has quite accounted for quite the anger that's created. Do you
feel that's not true, right?
Well, the thing is that he has refused to talk about this in any capacity whatsoever, and the narrative.
To me, there is like literally zero chance that this is what it's kind of in aesthetic supposed to be, which is a collection of games created by someone else that's being narrated over and occasionally hacked. I'm actually genuinely surprised that there's any kind of movement towards that. That just seems like it seems really deeply implausible to me.
Right.
Even if I think it's enough that Occam's Razor would say this is, a game that's created to be like a walking simulator by a person to sell on the internet.
Yeah.
But if you actually look at what the games are like, it doesn't feel at all like what it's supposed to be, which is basically like a game made every month by someone, and game in inverted commas, like a very short level experience.
Yeah.
Am I missing something here?
Well, it's really interesting the process you kind of went through in what you just said, because you started by saying that there is there's zero chance.
Yeah,
and
to me.
The interesting thing is that there's not zero chance. There's a very, very, very low chance, given the nature of the work, I suppose, that the history of the way people tell this kind of story. They pretend it's real, and he's done no interviews and made no comment to sort of try and bolster that. But what it is ambiguous. It's ambiguous. You can't know whether he has taken someone else's work or not. I don't think he has. I think it's very unlikely. But what you've seen through this Destructoid thing is this massive argument between people who say there is absolutely no chance of this happening and people who just believe it at face value, when in fact it's ambiguous. So my response to it was to say, hang on a minute, you can't have a culture where you're allowed to have all these different interpretations of things, which is what we've got now, and have this big fight between these two absolute positions on it.
Well, that's interesting. Because to connect with that point, I'm going to have to try and come off the completely certain belief that, to me, thinking this is anything other than just a game created by a guy, is akin to picking up a work of fiction that's told in the third person and assuming that it's the work of non-fiction.
Right.
I mean, it's just incredible. So in terms of what it's like to have the two sides arguing about the two different is there something that happens at the end which makes it more of an interpretation that this is that the game's actually trying to make you believe sort of outside of it that it is a actual work of criticism as opposed to an actual work of fiction.
I would say there's nothing in the ending that, for example, provides more evidence that would be true.
Okay.
So you can kind of take it tonally as being the same. It doesn't like go and show you a picture of the guy or anything like that. And
I have a suspicion that I'm not going to air, but I'm guessing there's a reason why we're not going to hear from the supposed creator. I'm almost unable to think in more meta terms about this conversation when I find it so implausible.
Yeah.
Which is probably why this is just a massive argument.
Right. I mean,
Destructoid, because I cannot. This is almost like the blue or the black dress thing. I can't see the other point of view.
This is the main reason I ranted about this so much is that it really shows you how powerful ambiguity is, even in a situation where, I mean, the chance of this being literally what it said, a bunch of stolen levels for someone, that is so unlikely to be true. It's so unlikely to be true, but it's not impossible. And people find that very difficult to deal with as an idea. You know, their interpretation has to be 100% true. There can be no doubt about it. Or it's sort of this massively vague thing where every perspective is correct. And I think that is really indicative of how games are treated generally. It's kind of perfect for the subject matter of this game, really.
Yeah, okay. I guess the main problem I have is that I didn't even actually think it was being presented. I know that it starts off with him saying, I'm his real name, and I made the Stanley Parable.
Yeah.
And blah, blah. So I understand that. So maybe I should have keyed onto that as it actually being presented as a thing that I was supposed to believe was this sort of work of criticism rather than work of fiction. I'm just going to have to think more about this.
Sure.
But even sidestepping that, this thing that the author of the piece said, just make sure to complete it within your Steam refund window, as there are legitimate reasons to want to return this game after purchase.
Yes. I'm
super interested by this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do actually think there's some odd stuff going on there. I suppose if you know, there's something very wrong about the phrase, just make sure to complete it within your Steam refund window.
Oh, yeah.
That's really, like, plausibly a bad thing to say.
Right,
you know?
right.
Like, I feel like it's Steam's job to make sure that games that are actually, like, immoral or something aren't on sale, or to refund you if they find out they're not.
Yeah.
It's not really your job to make sure you finish a game quickly enough that you can send it back if you decide after finishing it that you don't agree with it, I guess. I'm kind of against that.
Yeah, I agree. And this phrase has been, you know, she said that this was the wrong way of phrasing it. I think it certainly was the wrong way of phrasing it. I still don't know about this. There was a lot of argument about whether a site, like a news site, should be advocating that people refund things. And it's not something that I have a massive problem with, because you're allowed to refund for any reason. You know, if it was
I don't mind.
Yeah.
I don't mind the general, if they, you know, if you got a game that only runs on NVIDIA graphics cards, or like some NVIDIA graphics cards, I'd have a problem with a review saying, you know, buy it, if it doesn't run on your graphics card, refund it. Like, I know that's a bit of an extreme example, but, you know, or if it's just like something that you can't play, you know, this might be too violent for you.
Yeah.
If you can work out this in the first half an hour of playing it, I don't have a problem with them recommending you do that and then sort of send it back in a kind of a rare case, or even if you're colorblind or something, you know, that kind of thing. But there's just something about the thing that you have to complete it before you can work out whether it's worth buying or not. That's just sort of a bit bad. But I don't want to get too preoccupied with that, because I'm just gonna have to spend the next week trying to work out what to say, because you're really strongly saying that there's ambiguity here.
Yes.
And I'm kind of
There is
I'm trying to work out what my response to that is.
There is literally, it's about probability and ambiguity. I think, I was the same as you. When it started up and it's like, oh, this is a collection of levels by this guy, I just thought, well, yeah, okay, cool, that's a cool story, bro. Like, I immediately thought that was fictional.
But hold on, isn't it very different from normal ambiguity in fiction? Because there is a correct answer about this.
Well, I mean, that can sometimes be the case.
The case that he took a bunch of levels from someone else, or he didn't.
Yeah, I mean that's one.
So it's not ambiguous.
No, it is ambiguous. It just is potentially. You can potentially resolve the ambiguity. That doesn't deny the existence of the ambiguity, because that's about how much information you have, not about whether the information exists.
So is it the same as some fictional ambiguity, or is it just a different thing?
I think it's just a different type of ambiguity. I mean, yes, if you say, in a story somebody is murdered and you never find out who the murderer is, that's a different type of ambiguity from the author saying, hello, I am the author, I did this thing in real life. That's different. Authorial insertion makes that complicated, certainly.
So in a documentary... Because documentaries are so subjective to me. They're often, or they're almost always very. The creators of the documentaries have the kind of the way they want you to feel about it, even if they're trying to present it objectively.
Yeah,
I'm trying to work out if that's similar.
Sure.
Because a lot of these things that documentaries talk about are ambiguous. It's a story of someone's guilt or not guilt that no one knows the truth to.
Yeah.
There is a truth, but no one knows it, and you're asked to work it out on your own, I suppose.
Yeah, and also, how it's edited, which bits of people's statements they show, and the context they show them in. Maybe you make somebody who is saying certain things, you make it look like they're not someone to be trusted, and so that adds a layer of ambiguity there. I mean, the other thing here is that there's different ways in which that could be true, or maybe people feel that it's true. Maybe if this was very heavily based on a real person, or he remembered some ideas that a person put into some levels and then took those ideas, and then, maybe it's not sort of intellectual property theft in a copyright sense, but maybe it's sort of derivative of someone else. Would that be necessarily fulfill this idea of him stealing the work? Like, there's some other things going on there, and I don't like his stance on not doing interviews on this. It really, really bothers me intensely on a personal level, and I've been struggling with that since I played the game, because I can really understand how that makes it more effective and everything else, but I feel like these questions aren't interesting, and it would be nice to know the answer to them so you can really understand what he's done. If that's the best way I can express that.
Okay, I'm going to keep thinking about it. We'll return to this next week.
All right. Alec Meir wrote an ode to DOS nostalgia on RPS. Are you nostalgic for DOS?
Am I nostalgic for DOS? Tough question. I'm not sure. No. Just slightly not.
So there's a lot of... I like this piece. I love Alex sort of forlorn nostalgic writing about early PC gaming. I love it. I'm not nostalgic for DOS because of these reasons, like trying to get HighMem.sys to work. Like, I'm not nostalgic about that. That's the bad side of DOS. That was always bad. You might buy this game and then it wouldn't work. I remember once we had to write to the tech support people, and they wrote back with some code that we put in a autoexec.bat, and that's awful. That was horrendous. I think the DOS era of gaming is fantastic, but DOS itself is awful.
Yeah, lots of good games.
Yeah.
Had a good time with DOS, and indeed some of the tricks you had to pull. I guess, some people are probably really nostalgic about that process.
Yeah.
About having to get out their hacksaw to make things work. And neither of us are.
No. Sorry, DOS. We like your games, but I'm quite glad you're dead. Rick Lane claims that System Shock 2 is Irrational's finest work on Eurogamer. Is System Shock 2 Irrational's finest work?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
So what else are the rest of their work? I don't believe Irrational made System Shock 1, because I think that was Looking Glass.
Yeah.
And I suppose we're basically talking about the Bioshocks here.
Yeah.
I've come to like Bioshock 1 a lot more than
Yes.
I liked it when I first played it.
Yeah.
But System Shock 2 is really legitimately great.
Yeah.
And I really like it a lot more than Bioshock. And it's a lot more of a game to me. It has a lot of aesthetical cues that I like and less of a roller coaster
Yeah.
than Bioshock. Even though, again, to be fair, I'm always rude about Bioshock, but Bioshock 1's levels were really quite nice and big and tried to be open and stuff. But it was still about a bit sort of overwrought storytelling
Yes.
in the wrong way for me with
Yep.
Bioshock, whereas System Shock 2, which is also overwrought storytelling, is much better. What do you think?
I've tried to play System Shock 2 a couple of times, and it's always felt like all of the cool stuff happens straight away, and then it just becomes this drudgery of going through these endless, very samey corridors, kind of under this boring threat all the time. And fans of System Shock 2 are going to pillory me if any of them are listening to this, but I just didn't... I got excited about it at the beginning, and then somehow it really didn't deliver on its promise for me.
Well, so the things I like about it are, I think, almost at the top is that it really properly kind of fully models a spaceship.
Yeah.
And I really like that when things do that. And it's a really cool spaceship to be on.
Yeah.
And I'm not really big into like horror elements, and I could still cope with them. It had interesting skills. It was one of the first games to do the journal thing where you were discovering dead people's journals, which is really stupid but kind of works.
Yeah.
I like Shodan.
Mm-hmm.
I like the aesthetic, and I kind of basically liked the gameplay. I remember some pretty interesting stuff that happened, like a third of the way through, half the way through, 2/3 of the way through. So it wasn't just all at the beginning for me. I think when it moved to the second ship, it went a bit downhill.
Yeah.
But I remember a really, really cool bit just before that happened. So yeah, no, I'm a big fan.
Maybe I should try one more time, because sometimes sometimes with games that I've tried multiple times to get into, it just hasn't clicked for some reason. But I feel like, the setting stuff, I definitely agree with you. Like Bioshock 1 had these really interesting levels, and the setting was interesting, but the atmosphere and some aspects of the narrative were very heavy-handed, and they just kind of pushed you along through the interesting space. So that was okay, and the gameplay was quite good. Bioshock Infinite, I think the setting was fantastic, and the gameplay was awful, and some of the level design was awful. So I kind of want like a fusion of what's good about all three of these games together. I think would be a very interesting game for me. But none of them have ever really grabbed me, although I did finish Infinite. That was kind of out of a weird sense of duty more than anything else. But I always feel like there's something missing from Irrational's games.
Interesting. Yeah, I got kind of shall we say irrationally offended by Bioshock Infinite.
Well, it's quite a bad game, so
yeah, and I really disliked how the setting made it overtly clear how linear it was, because these floating islands, it didn't immerse me, as well as being really annoying as well. And I feel like I wish I'd been more open-minded about Bioshock 1. But again, I mean, Looking Glass is the real great here. And Irrational, I think, I don't think Ken Levine took the remnants of Looking Glass in the direction I wanted him to take it in. And that's fine. But yeah, I think System Shock 2 is hard to play. I remember there being this massive controversy at the time about the fact that the enemies respawned. Which is like a no-no for PC games, as you know. And this article talks about how that's so that you never feel safe. And I really bought into that, and it made me re-examine my stance on that and understand it as a cool decision. But they did patch it out. So the reception to that was obviously extremely bad. But then that's an interesting point in and of itself. Like horror games, that's the kind of thing they would do to keep pushing you forward, to keep you out of your comfort zone. But that just really clashed with what people wanted to do in FPSs. So
and also it's sort of the opposite ethos to this modelling of the ship. You kind of want that to be a total thing. Yes, perhaps one day I'll go back to it. And now there's this company remaking System Shock 1 as well. Don't know if you've seen that.
It rings a bell.
Yeah, so there's definitely something. I mean, in the modern era of games, it's this type of game that's really lacking. So I'm not surprised that people are doing these retrospectives now and they're doing remakes and so on, because the way modern FPSs have gone is sort of almost completely the opposite direction from this. They've either gone very RPG heavy or they've gone, COD direction.
Yeah.
Also in Eurogamer, narration is identified as one of the trends of 2015. Does that mean narration is over?
No, I don't think so. I think narration is like a fundamental game thing now.
Yeah.
I think that it's here to stay, and I think it's really good. Obviously, 2015 might be the year of gadget narration. Actually, no, that's not even slightly true. This has been the decade of gadget narration.
Sure.
Narration is cool. I really, really like games that have a guy talking to you. It's really great. Far Cry 1, probably my favourite use of it.
Yeah.
And it enables you to do lots of fun gags, even when it's not being gadget. It enables to give you pointers. It fills out things that the game can't show you from your perspective. It's absolutely great, and I basically think every first-person shooter should have what I'm going to call narration. I mean, that's what I view as a guy talking to you as you go through the game.
Yes.
And it can be massively effective elsewhere. It was effective in the Beginner's Guide, so I'm a big fan, and that's it.
I'm very selective with this. Narration, I suppose you would describe as at least, a voice describing the action, be it first person or third person. I mean, Bastion was the one that everyone went on about with third person narration, and I unfortunately just found that very annoying. First person narration, there's a great Family Guy bit where Peter starts narrating his life in the first person, and he talks about himself going to the fridge and getting some milk, and then his wife becoming annoyed with him because he's narrating everything in the first person. And a lot of narration ends up being like that. The Beginner's Guide is very good because, irrespective of kind of what we said before, you do kind of buy in. You sort of buy into the fact that it's the creator talking, and that's an interesting thing. Max Payne, very good narration in Max Payne. But yeah,
different, a very different use of narration in Max Payne, actually.
Yes.
Actually, that's kind of more of the Portal school for me.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of being used as a narrative beat and as a game level beat.
Yeah.
Which feels somehow distinct to me. It almost was more linear in those games. And it would often be used to give a bit of extra spice. Well, in Portal, always used to give a bit of extra spice in the between bits between levels. Whereas again, sort of thinking about BioShock 1 or Far Cry 1, it being much more about telling you what to do, and responding to events with you, which I feel is very different to somehow to some of the other stuff, I guess.
Well, the difference between Portal and Max Payne is actually really interesting, because in Portal, obviously, it's a character talking to you in the world, and there's a lot of humour that's derived from that, and they're, sort of lampshading and pointing out sort of specific things about the game. Whereas in Max Payne, it's very much in a tradition of, kind of noir, first-person sort of schlocky, melodramatic voiceover, and all of the comedy and irony there is sort of derived from its earnestness. So you can really do very different things with voiceover, I guess is the correct term for everything. Max Payne is more narration and Portal is not. So you can do a lot with this. What I really want is for people to... Max Payne is so good because it takes on this tradition, and it does a lot of good things with tradition. Portal is good because it's really funny, and there are a lot of good gags in narration. If you look at something like, I'm going to butcher the name of this, Dr. Langoose Steve and the Terrible Tiger, or whatever it was called, the Tiger and the Emerald, the Crows free game by William Pugh et al. The problem I had with that is that it has the Simon Amstell, who's a brilliant comedian, who's talking to you as the player all the time, but he doesn't have any gags. He's got very few actual gags in the narration to do, and it's kind of like you have to treat this so carefully. You have to be as good as narration in other forms, which I think probably Max Payne, maybe Dear Esther actually are.
Yeah, totally. I'm afraid I'm about to upset some people. A game that I really disliked the narration on was Little Big Planet.
Yeah.
That just didn't work for me at all. As much as I like Stephen Fry, and he's all very funny and British and all of that, but it didn't really seem to sort of work within a game's aesthetic in the way that I certainly like. But, you know, having a sidekick that can make funny jokes when things happen, because so many ridiculous things happen in even completely straight computer games. Again, Far Cry. Having like a sidekick to make funny comments about them is absolutely great and can be brilliant.
Yeah.
And it just feels like a lot of the time it's just it's a channel that you'd want to have, and music is so difficult to get right in first-person shooters. I feel like in first-person games people have decided the best thing to do is generally to have music cues every so often, rather than having a continual music track. Narration's like another channel for me like that.
Sure. Kotaku has a list of the most ridiculous things that happened in gaming in 2015, including wanking Mario and a player protest based on images of goats. Which of these do you find most ridiculous?
Yeah, this list didn't involve us once. Terrible. Right. Well, all I can say, you should read this article. It's really funny. There's a really amazing thing with a Metal Gear Solid character and a real-life doctor who wants to perform the world's first head transplant, who apparently looks a lot like a character from Metal Gear Solid, and then Kojima actually kind of played up on that. And Boris Johnson's confused by VR. But I think that clearly, well, let's choose one that will get disagreement between you and me, because I think that the most ridiculous thing is Bethesda embargoing the embargo date for Fallout 4. Now I know this has been very effective. It's probably going to be used by everyone else now until it's really not funny anymore. But I'd kind of like to know whose idea it was, and sort of to what extent it was purely a business decision, you know, because they knew it would get more news stories when the embargo date of the embargo date dropped.
Yeah.
And to what extent it was some guys who know how to make computer games and been doing it for a long time, doing something quite funny. Either way, I think it was really amazing and really stupid, and now everyone's going to do it.
I know this isn't really one that's going to get any disagreement from me. It's so stupid, and I'm going to go with, I think companies of this size are beyond irony, so I don't think there was any, like, oh, you know what, this will get more press and it's weird. And there wasn't that. It was like, we have to control this date so much. It's the biggest date we have. How can we control everything about it? And that was just, I mean, it is madness, and I feel sorry for journalists now. You can't say when the embargo date is. That's so silly. I think the thing that I'm on this list, I just wanted to highlight the PlayStation SNES, because this has followed us the whole year. We've never been able to get away from the PlayStation SNES, and I'm sick of it. Like, I want this to be buried with 2015, with the Taylor Swift albums and the, you know, with everything that happened in 2015. I want this to not leach into next year.
It really wasn't as exciting as it should have been.
It's not exciting at all. I hate it.
The Super Nintendo PlayStation.
I absolutely hate it. Before we move on, I just want to quickly mention the Square Enix guy who only appears in public wearing that head. He's not had quite enough coverage. I know he's had a fair amount. But and also the thing about that head is it's actually really hard to find out what's going on, like, because I think that when he's in the head he's named differently, and it's just fantastic. So the head, yes, and the SNES PlayStation, no.
Okay.
The ever fantastic Brandon Sheffield has a list of the most surprising 90s games on Gamasutra, which you should just read because they're all brilliant. But which of these did you find most surprising?
I'm going to punt this over to you because I haven't actually read this one yet.
Oh, you have to read it as well. Go and quickly do a stealth Google of this while I talk about it. So
yeah, you talk about it.
I'm going to start with, I think, Anisan, which is a PC Engine game that Brandon has turned up, which is a sort of side-scrolling beat-em-up where all the characters are girls, high school girls, and you have to beat all these bosses of rival clans, and then when they get out of hospital, they join up with your girl gang. And you have dreams, and when you go to sleep in the dreams, they're usually about rainbows and unicorns. and then you just start fighting again. And there's one man in the game who you never see, and you just marry them at the end. So
no.
It just sounds amazing. It just
Doesn't sound socially acceptable nowadays.
Well, he's saying that he thinks it's an inversion, right? So there's the only male in the game is like the goal of the game, and they don't have anything to say or do, and everyone else
are you saving him?
It's just girls, yeah. So he's saying that it's progressive for 1995. There's a Game Boy roguelike.
It's not going to surprise you at all to find that this is the thing that I've got onto. There's a Game Boy roguelike, Game Boy 1 roguelike called Cave Noir, which I'm sorry is an amazing name for a roguelike.
It is.
Cave Noir, 1991. Which I'm going to have to go and play now. I don't know how I best... Can I play Game Boy 1 games on my Vita? I guess not, because I haven't jailbroken it.
Yeah, and you probably can't get it on Virtual Console either, because
I bet not.
It's probably too old.
But this sounds like a cool thing. I don't have a Game Boy 1 anymore, I'm afraid.
I think, yes, but Brandon is like the go-to guy for obscure, often Japanese 90s games. Pup Breeder also looks really interesting, which he claims might be the first ever 3D RTS on the Saturn, where you breed these pups and they go off and like do things for you. They find resources and they come back. Fully 3D RTS in 1996 on a home console. He manages to find a Genesis game that I've never heard of, which is quite a feat, as I have heard of most Genesis games. But yes, surprising. We were certainly surprised. Right, it's that time of year again. No, not the weird chasm between Christmas and New Year. It's Game of the Year time. Now, Ian Hardingham, do you have any games of the year? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, I'm looking at your list.
Yeah, we can do my list.
Why don't you do your list first, and
Right.
I can disagree with it.
Okay, so I'm putting the beginner's guide on the list because, as I said, I think it's an important thing that has happened, and it's going to take the walking simulator slot over Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, which I felt was good, but had some very severe problems, including just getting around the bloody thing. So that didn't make the list. But Beginner's Guide, very cool. We talked about it a lot. Going up the list, that's the bottom of the list. Going up this, we've got The Swindle. Now, I think some people might find this a controversial choice. It's not a perfect game, but it's very intriguingly designed, and it's going to be one that I come back to. And I think it really pushes that roguelite-y, Spelunky-esque genre in a completely new direction.
I can't say I agree. I'm not going to be too rude about Dan Marshall's game. I think it's obviously reasonably effective, and I know you like it a lot, and that's fine. I guess I can respect that. I didn't manage to find anything that massively turned me on when I originally started it, but this is your list. So
I think people underrate how innovative it is. I think there's a lot going on there, and other games need to look at some of those new mechanics that he developed and just sort of figure out why they're good. Moving up the list, Elite Dangerous, which is not a game that I played a huge amount, but I did sit down with it and play around with it and go, this exists. This in 2015, this game exists, and it's so cool. And it's going to be like Eve. It's going to be a game I fantasize about actually playing, but probably don't ever do it. But the scope was so impressive to me. The fact that it got finished was impressive to me. So that's on the list as a kind of honorary thing, I guess. Binding of Isaac Rebirth, talks about that a lot. It's just a great game. The version of it on the Vita is the best version. It's great. Prison Architect, talks about that a lot. As an indie game, it's a total triumph. It managed to make me play a solid 8-hour play session, which I haven't done for many years. It's so compulsive. Rocket League, and my game of the year is Nuclear Throne. I'm not going to ever stop playing this game. It's a phenomenal game. I've played quite a lot now. I'm still not bored of it. There's loads more to discover in it. It's just a brilliant game. Addictive, wonderful.
Yeah, solid list.
Solid list.
Elite Dangerous is a game that I kind of really wish I could discover in 3 years, never ever having heard of it.
Sure.
And just lose myself in it. It's kind of a game that I think has the potential to really fulfill that, although I've just, for whatever reason, I feel from the things I've heard about it, it's just got limits in my mind of how amazing it can be, which just makes me not really want to get into it again. I tried it for a little while last Christmas. I'm not particularly convinced it came out this year, by the way, but
it's on the list.
It may have done. My apologies if it has. Yeah, Rocket League. I mean, it's just kind of, it's not a very trendy game in a lot of ways to love, because everyone loves it. So it's too trendy or whatever. But it's great. Nuclear Throne. Yeah, I agree. It is amazing. I've got a couple of issues with it at the moment. It does make me kind of angry in a way that Spelunky doesn't. I'm not yet convinced about the late game. But I'm still playing it loads every day, so I'm going to find out. I'm just a little unconvinced by some of the stuff I've seen from the later worlds. But I basically think it's absolutely brilliant. And I was trying to think if there was much else that I played this year. I think I'd definitely put Metal Gear Solid on here.
Yeah.
That's like a truly great game. I kind of wish I was sort of 17 and playing it on the PC and able to just play it for 100 hours. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Fallout 4, despite being a game I played a lot this year, I'm not going to put on my list. I think it's been a pretty good year.
Yeah.
I sponsor 2015 as a year of games.
People are saying it's a bad year, which, like, that has been a thing that's gone around. How can you possibly think that? It's such an odd thing to think.
Yeah, I don't know what those people, what they want to come out, what they're missing, but I don't know.
I guess that's, if you have a very AAA focus, then maybe. But you've got Fallout 4 and MGS5.
Yeah, and the COD Blops, of course, and FIFA still came out.
Yeah, and it was a good Blops, as we discussed. I think if you like a Blops, then you're not going to be upset by that Blops.
Yeah. And Prison Architect, I'm looking forward to really getting into.
Yes.
I've got a massive amount of respect for it. I just haven't had a chance to play it yet.
So Elite Dangerous, you are right. Technically 1.0 was 16th of December 2014. So it just didn't quite sneak out. So maybe I'm not allowed to have that one, although it's been ongoing, of course. Maybe I'm not allowed to have that one. But there you go. That's that. Ding. Oh, I left Grim Fandango off the list. It was lurking below the page break as an honourable mention. I think it's cool that some of these games are coming back. I want Day of the Tentacle to be in there. So
yeah, I loved being able to play Grim Fandango properly for the first time on my Vita. That was great.
Yes.
I'm expecting Day of the Tentacle to just sully the memory of this amazing game. So less excited about that.
There we go.
But that's just me.
Right, that's the end of that. We probably talked about Nuclear Throne enough that we don't need the extra section to talk about Nuclear Throne, unless there's anything else you want to say about it particularly.
No. Like I say, I love playing it. I played it on the PS4 once.
Yeah.
And decided that playing on the PS4 was making me worse at the Vita version.
Yes.
So I just decided to keep on playing on the Vita, which isn't as pleasant an experience, but is one I can do much more often.
I find it significantly easier on the PS4 than the Vita.
I'm not surprised. I think the size of the analog sticks makes a big difference. And also, you've got a higher frame rate. The end of World 3 boss on the Vita goes to like literally 1 frame a second.
You mean
when
the big dog, don't you?
Yeah, the huge dog thing.
That's amazingly hilarious. You just have to be in a safe place when that happens, otherwise you die.
Yeah, I play as the crystal thing, so I just turn on the shield when that happens.
Yeah.
But it's really ridiculous.
I only play that character. Yeah, I haven't been playing that regularly, so I've kind of plateaued, and I sort of reached there quite regularly, but not very much further than there. But then I think it does get quite difficult around that point. In a lot of playthroughs.
I've unlocked Steroids now, which is a guy that can dual wield.
Yes.
And somewhat similarly, I'm not playing with it because I'm pretty sure that I won't be able to go back to playing any other character.
Yeah.
If I play as him loads. You talked about the diamonds that fire off screen.
Yeah.
It does give you a little sparkle.
It does.
But I think it's basically bad game design.
I agree. I don't like that bit at all. It's just not fun. Like, it's easy to miss. I ranted about this before. Things that are hard to see are bad game design and should not be in any games. That's how extreme I feel about that. Small things that are hard to see, don't put them in your game.
The power up Gamma Guts.
Yes.
I can't see how that's not like by far away the most important power up. Like that turns World 5 turns the Ice World into like it's so much easier because there are loads of enemies that do very annoying melee damage that just don't when you've got this thing.
So can you? How does that actually work? Do you?
So basically, it makes it sound like it's just a thing that if you walk into enemies, it does some damage, which is a thing that does that. But basically, enemies like the rats, and more importantly, the big gorilla things when they charge you, just don't do any damage if you have it.
Is that now? Which enemies do damage? Because whenever I've taken it, I've been massively confused about this, and it's just caused me to think that doesn't happen. But it does.
The guys that use melee weapons still do damage.
Oh, okay.
And I think so that there are the weird. I think they're called assassins.
The purple guys with the stick thing.
Yeah, they still do damage.
I hate them. Yes.
Yeah, but the ones that, from what I can tell, basically the ones that do melee damage by touching you just don't, and that's a huge deal.
That is a huge deal
in the fifth world.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like if I get to the fifth world and I don't have that, I'm kind of like I'm probably not going to get any much further. And I've been to World 6 once.
Okay.
No, World 7 once, and it was really like kind of boringly hard at that point.
Yeah.
There's something interesting about the weapons, like like you have to kind of level up with the weapons at around that point. Like there are some very much better weapons that you kind of need to get, but and I'm still kind of bemused a bit by the just like giving you 4 random power-ups and choosing one. Like I'm not sure it's a bad thing. It's just kind of a slightly inelegant thing.
I really like that. I kind of wish there were more different ones to choose from, and like you could sort of stack them. Although you can stack them in some ways. They feel a bit too direct for me. Like I would like a bit more of an Isaac-y complex system there, just because it's so easy. You see the effect and everything, so you could work out your own combinations and stuff. But maybe that would be too much.
I don't have a problem with the actual effects. It's so weird that you're so at the mercy of the RNG for that. On the other hand, by the time you get to level 5 or something, you've got 5 different choices, and you've probably had a shot at 75% of them by that point.
Yeah.
So it's not too bad, and the weapons thing is cool. Like I think it's nice that it kind of pushes you into getting good at different ones. I'm still kind of working out if there are any tweaks to that formula that I prefer. One
of the things I find is that on Vita, if you take energy weapons too early, you tend to get into problems because it's harder to aim, and so you use a lot more ammo.
Energy weapons just don't seem anywhere near as good as the crossbow weapons to me. But I may just not be. I may not just be using them properly.
I know people.
But it looks like we were able to talk more about this.
We did very much. Yes, well, we'll continue. I need to play a bit more regularly again and try and get a bit better. So I wanted to quickly talk about Undertale, which is a game that's dominated discussion a lot. And I've played 4 hours of it now. I've nearly finished it, I think. I'm gonna say that I think it's really hugely overrated, and that's gonna upset a lot of people. Let me start by saying the things about it that I like. It's very funny. The writing is very funny. The music is amazing. The art is fine and interesting, and the fact that it's all done by one guy pretty much is kind of its appeal. But it's kind of mocking this type of game that doesn't really need mocking. Like, a JRPG is one of the most ridiculous forms of game design ever. And to the extent to which, something like Earthbound is very consciously a sort of self-parody. So to have something that's quite parodic of Earthbound, it seems a bit unnecessary to me. And the combat stuff gets very boring towards the end. So the combat in Undertale is basically bullet hell avoidance. So you have a little heart icon and you move it around. You have to avoid all these bullets coming at it for each round of an enemy's attack. And that's fine, and it starts off okay, but you end up doing that loads and loads and loads of times with silly variations. Like there's a rhythm action variation, and there's one where you have to kind of fly through sort of spaceships Galaga style and stuff like that. It's just fine. Like it shouldn't be on any greatest games of all time list. That's insane. That's my take on Undertale.
Okay, interesting. I don't know if I'll get around to playing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of half liked the aesthetic of what it was doing and half felt it was a little bit too basic.
Yeah.
But I'll probably just take your word for it.
These basic aesthetic games are kind of a thing. There's that and Downwell, of course, which kind of and I do like that.
But Downwell felt a little bit more coherent and cohesive than the stuff I saw of Undertale, but I haven't properly played it.
Yeah, I mean, people really are going on it. So that you can do multiple playthroughs and stuff. You do changes the game, and you can kill, and I everything felt so light to me that I didn't get invested in any characters. So sort of killing them or not killing them didn't really make me feel anything. A lot of the characters are just sort of very one-note jokes. People will say that there's some complexity to them and so on. It's all very light to me. I just, maybe it's because I don't have this strong affection for the genre. That I don't sort of find it nostalgic or anything, that I'm not having that response. But yes, you should play it perhaps sometime and give me your thoughts on that.
Okay.
Right, so that's the end of that. And now there's no games released this week in 2005, thanks to Eurogamer, which I find slightly hard to believe. But anyway, we move on. The top 10 UK Steam games this week. At number 10, it's the Star Wars Collection, 77% off. Number 9, it's Ori the Blind Forest, 40% off. Now, this is one of the things that I think it's passed both of us by, but a lot of people really, really like this game.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of it.
Yeah.
And I think I looked at... Yeah, it looks nice, right? It's got these beautiful hand-drawn-y graphics. Oh, it's a bit vectory, actually. Yeah, no, fairly beautiful.
I think that might be something that we need to look at. Endless Legend Collection is next. I also don't know much about Endless Legend.
People really respect Endless Legend.
Right.
People say that this is one of the most sort of progressive. It's kind of like how are we going to call this? It's kind of like a sort of a big world, slightly civvy, fantasy thing. With hexes, and people say this is really amazing.
Okay, I'm going to buy that. That I've just decided.
Cool. It's not generally my kind of thing.
Yeah.
I expect it will still be kind of old-fashioned for me, but people are saying that this is really nice.
It is £7. It is going in my cart. There you go.
Fair enough.
Number 7 is Ark Survival Evolved, which I do not recommend you put in your cart.
Okay.
Number 6 is The Witcher 3. Yeah. Number 5 is Rocket League. Number 4 is Rainbow Six Siege. Still haven't played that. I'm being called out by people on Twitter for saying that I'm going to play games and not playing them, which is one of the reasons that I played Undertale. But I'm sure Miodrag Kovacevic will be on me again about Rainbow Six Siege next week. Number 3 is Fallout 4, number 2 is CSGO, and number 1 is GTA 5. So that's all very boring. And now we move quickly, but gently, into the television and film lounge area. Now, sir, you and me, we have a date. I've booked you in for a date where we're going to drink whiskey and watch 1996 Vampire the Masquerade IP TV series Kindred the Embraced, which purports to be about sexy vampires. I think it directly says that in the marketing copy, but I found this on IMDb. I did not realise that there's an actual TV series based on one of my favourite IPs, Vampire the Masquerade.
So, yeah, I'm quite excited about this date.
So we're gonna watch that. The only other thing I wanted to mention in the television and film lounge area was some of my Christmas viewing, which was the BBC's version of And Then There Were None, which is an Agatha Christie. Some say the best Agatha Christie, and this was absolutely brilliant. It was a 3-episode thing, very kind of high budget. And what they did was they didn't make it sort of postmodern or ironic. They just embraced all the genre conventions to the maximum. So it was a spooky house with lightning, there was a creepy servant, there was all kinds of, every single cliche happened. It had Charles Dance in it, who is Tyrion.
Oh my goodness.
Tyrion Lannister,
I'm
of course.
there.
Sam Neill.
I'm going to find this on iPlayer.
It's
man.
really,
solid
if you like murder mystery, it is absolutely brilliant. And they put some horror stuff in, but it's very light horror stuff, and it actually fits because the whole story is completely gothic and ridiculous. So I really liked that. It was excellent. I hope they do more.
That's great.
So there you go.
Good.
Did you have any good Christmas viewing?
I mainly watched college football.
Yes, good.
Which I thoroughly enjoyed. I watched the last episode of the third season of the Danish Bridge.
Oh, yes.
Last night,
Yes.
which Liz, my wife, really likes.
Mm.
And that was fine, but kind of, again, just like The Killing, sort of went completely OTT after the first series.
Yes.
I kind of am over that.
I like Series 1 and 2. Series 2, not as good as Series 1. Series 3, I got really bored towards the middle, and then I went away for a couple of days.
The Killing?
Yeah. Sorry, the bridge.
I
Sorry.
absolutely hate Series 3 of The Killing.
I don't mean The Killing, I mean The Bridge.
Oh, you mean The Bridge? Oh, right, okay.
I refuse to watch Series 3 of The Killing because of what people say it's like.
Good.
And I like The Killing so much. But Series 3 of The Bridge, it started, I was like, oh yeah, it's the same characters, yeah. And I didn't buy into it, but so there's that. Right, we've got one listener question this week, and it's from Binster, and his question is, cheekiest robot? Which I presume means who is the cheekiest robot. And I'm going to go with the robot from Undertale, the psychotic robot who tries to make you do a multiple choice quiz show and then a cookery show after that involves climbing an infinitely tall cabinet. And yeah, he's a cheeky robot.
That sounds pretty cheeky, so I'll go with that.
Okay, good. Right, that's the end of that. Thank you very much for listening and for all your listenership in 2015. We will be continuing this epic journey with you in 2016, so we look forward to that very much. Goodbye.
Goodbye, thank you for listening, and good night.
That's it, children. Time for bed. Don't forget to pay us a visit at www.visitingthevillage.com.